Kia ora whānau, welcome back to another episode of Ngahere Talks. It's pretty awesome to have one of the kai kōrero of Aotearoa podcast here with us today. Hepa Te Moana, otherwise known as Bestsiiide. How are you supposed to say that actually?
Nā tika.
Like that?
Yeah.
Because it's three eyes, right?
Yeah. So that came about, growing up in Taranaki, born and raised there. Like we used to walk around saying like West Side, you know, because we're on the west side of the North Island and 90s hip hop influence and all that. And then also, so growing up on the west side, best side, exaggerating that I sound because we used to do that as kids, and also the conversations that I have to encourage people to open up their third eye.
Yes.
So hence 3 eyes.
Oh, awesome. Well, ngā mihi e hoa. Welcome to the show. It's really awesome to have you. And while you're at it, why don't you just give us a little mihi, introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, and all of that.
No reira, kia rei te whanui, ko hoi Hepa Te Moana tēnei, te taha tuku whaia, he uri no Ngāpuhi no Fiji hoki, te taha tuku matua, he uri no te whānau apanui, engari e ai ki te kōrero katahi anō, ko puta ai, i tipu ai, I whānau mai I raru I te maunga teitei o Taranaki. So, yeah, from the west, from the east, from the north, but born and raised in the west. So, everybody's kid, they say.
Oh, it's awesome to have you here today.
Awesome to be here.
Hopefully the first of many occurrences where we get to hang out together and mahi hard together.
I think that's going to happen.
Yes, I think so too. So tell me a little bit before we get into it. I'd love to know a little bit more about you. What was your life like growing up?
It was pretty interesting. So as I said, born and raised in Taranaki, in New Plymouth in town. Kind of, I guess, a defining sort of story, or it's public knowledge, and I speak about it in the podcast too. My parents kind of went through a bit of a interesting divorce, which led to me living in lots of other houses outside of home. So I spent a lot of time growing up in heaps and heaps of houses in different parts of town, different social, economical areas, different demographics, different ethnicities, cultures, and all sorts of things. So once again, everybody's kid. I suppose for a little bit there, I suppose I was what you would call a state kid, so staying in different whare and all that sort of thing. And at the time, I used to think when I was younger that it's like the worst thing ever in the world. I used to spend some late nights up kind of sulking about it, for lack of a better term. But now that I'm older, I realise it's probably the best thing to ever happen to me, because it gives me a lot of insight into how different parts of Aotearoa function and their perceptions and their beliefs, and just trying to make it all work. We're all just doing the best with what we have.
That's right.
Trying to make it happen. So
yeah. I was going to ask you that too. Like, what do you think? You kind of answered it already, but what did you really learn from, take from that experience growing up like that?
Oh, one, I guess, like I said, everyone's just doing the best of what they can with what they have. There's no one answer for anything. There's a lot of grey in life.
Yeah.
For example, I'd be staying with one whānau who, you're all good to wear your shoes inside. Dad would let you have a beer with him on a Wednesday sort of thingy, and we were like 14, 15. And then you go to another whare and you got to be up on Sunday for church, So my life at the time, it was quite, I guess, for lack of a better term, tumultuous. Like you never knew what was around the corner. Every whare operated differently.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I say, it definitely set me up, because I'm pretty comfortable going into quote unquote foreign spaces or unknown spaces, because I've been there before and I've come out okay. Yeah. And there's always something to learn. Yeah. That's probably the big thing.
And sets you up with that resilience, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
As an adult. So who would you say have been some of the key influences in your life?
Oh man, I've been lucky to have so many. A lot of wahine. And I'm not saying that degrees, but definitely mana wahine has been...
show off, yeah. All the ladies.
and not trying to, kiss up as well. But a lot of wahine in my life, when I reflect back on those times of the craziness, there's so many mums that just held it down. I'm so, in the actual, I guess for lack of a better term, my tūranga waima, my birth whare, I'm one of 5 boys. And so that's crazy enough. When I look at my friends now, so I'm 32 and I'm seeing my friends all having children, and go to the supermarket and one of them might have 2 kids, and that's hectic. And then it makes me reflect on my mum with the 5 of us and how hectic that must have been. And then other whare that I've stayed in. So how I guess I kind of, when things started to kind of go a bit downwards at home with me, and then which led to me going into these other whare, it was actually a collective group of women that got together and said, hey, this kid's going to end up in the system. We need to kind of work together to make sure that doesn't happen. And they sort of put together a bit of a roster to look after me to make sure that didn't happen.
Yeah.
So a lot of those, wahine I have, like I call them all mum. So that's like a big thing too.
So
like
beautiful.
when I was younger, I used to think I don't have a family. Like I was comparing, to be honest, I was just comparing myself to TV too much.
Yeah.
I was like, I didn't have the Hollywood picture perfect family. Now that I'm older, I've got the biggest family in the world. Like it's it's huge. So definitely all the mums that I've ever had, they've been huge influences. I've always said that I belong to three cultures. I guess there's the Māoriness, then there's also the, for lack of a better term, I don't like the term, but like Kiwi culture or New Zealand culture. And then there's hip-hop culture too. Because a lot of that, the music and the aspirations that music talks about, because to me hip-hop is the music of the betrodden, right? It's the music of people that are fighting and trying to get things done and pushing through, and that resilience that you mentioned. So a lot of those hip-hop artists, I know it sounds cliche, typical brown boy, but a lot of those artists, they got me through some of the hardest times in my life. When I was by myself in those spaces trying to think, where am I going to stay tonight? Where's my next meal coming from? I was listening to a lot of their music and realizing they have been where I am now. They got to where they are. There's nothing to say that I can't get there too. Yeah. Not that I have aspirations to become a famous rapper, but it was just that.
You never know.
Wouldn't
mind.
It was just that that belief and that hope that music was able to give me.
Yeah.
So I do derive a lot from hip hop music and like especially the Aotearoa scene.
Yeah.
Because I was a radio announcer for 8 years working in Iwi Radio.
Oh, choice.
And so I got a chance to meet a lot of those dudes. So I know that they're like real people, not just people you see on TV.
Have you heard that podcast Mogul?
No.
Oh, you gotta watch it.
Okay.
I'll listen to it. You'll love it. It's essentially like the whole season is I just started listening to potentially season 3. But it's like untold or like really influential stories from hip hop culture.
Oh yeah.
Told over a series of episodes.
And I love those things too. Like there's heaps of nuances within the culture that make you go, oh, because you think a lot of these things just happen by accident, or this person just randomly met this person, and that does happen a lot too. But then when you kind of hear some of those low-key where things were intentionally done or someone set out with a goal to make that happen, it wasn't just by mistake.
Totally. So this recent series is on, I forget the name of the DJ, but he started to really like slow down the tracks and slow down, or like mix up, like kind of distort the tracks and slow down the lyrics or the voices, which started a whole new hip-hop culture. I forget his name, but it's really, really interesting.
Sounds
and he
like
started just by selling
that Houston
mixtapes.
Scene and the chopped and screwed music stuff.
So he was he started that, and he started off selling tapes, like mixtapes at like the night markets, kind of like the equivalent to the night markets, and would sell like thousands of them every time that he'd get them out, just for $10. It's real interesting. Anyway, you should check it out.
Yeah, it sounds like it might be someone from that sushi house.
So wahine, big influences in your life. What do you take away from that now as a tane?
Yeah, it is like it's a super interesting sort of space to be in. Like I said before, and I suppose like I didn't mean to cop out when I said I don't want to, be a kiss grease up a bit, but it's because like I am real aware that like, advocacy for women stuff seems to be like popular at the moment.
Yeah. So you're not trying to just blend in.
Nah. So when you like speak about those sort of things, well, there are people that just want to accuse you of doing that, right? I know within myself that I'm not doing that, so I'm fine and I can carry myself confidently because I know. Yeah. And when you know, it's just easy. But I do. A lot of dudes will be like, bro, why do you never used to talk about that? And they're probably right. It's probably something I should have been talking about a long time ago. But man, as a tane, it's, I suppose recognizing the privilege we have as tane, that has been huge for me because I used to be very much the typical, everyone's, born on an even playing field, despite what I've been through. And that's what I used to say and that's what I used to think. I don't agree with those views anymore. For me, it's quite easy to see that there's, certain like systems are designed. Like when I think of kids when they play with, I can't remember what they're called, but where you try and fit the blocks in. So there's certain shapes, right, that are ingrained into that toy. If you're a block that doesn't suit those shapes, then you can't integrate into that system, and that definitely happens.
Yeah.
for me, it's quite evidential. There's a lot of things, references or examples where a system was designed for certain shapes to fit into it. If you're not one of those shapes, well, then you're not fitting in. And I think being Tāne, there are more systems which allow that shape to fit in.
Yeah.
Because it was probably designed by a Tāne at some stage. And then also on top of that, not only was it designed by a Tāne, but like is probably actually the idea from a wahine. They just took it and molded it, because that happens to like Indigenous culture, which I know we're going to get into, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's it has happened a lot as well. I guess, but patriarchy, I think, is the term that a lot of people use. So I'm still new in that space in terms of learning, but like for me, it's been big just acknowledging that happens, because it's sad to say that I was someone who was like, nah, that's not a thing.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. And then now, after just listening to, these mums that I mentioned, people who I'd call my sisters too, cousins, whanaunga, all wahine and stuff, and actually just like listening and hearing what they go through.
Yeah.
And then it kind of opens up to the possibility, and then you start to actually see it, and that adds layers to it. So that's been the big thing. Like from small things, like in my workplace at the moment, trying to do a lot of advocacy for people that go through endometriosis. Just because a lot of wahine in my life, they've touched by it, and they express to me how that hinders their work life. And then so just trying to make things easier in that space. So that's kind of just one example of things I'm doing my best to help out with not leading it myself, but just being there to tautoko and be in the background.
That's really special. That's awesome. So moving on from, say, your upbringing and your early influences, like what's your career journey been like since you started in the working world, and right up to how you ended up here at Shopify? I
honestly reckon, and this is going to sound cliche and some people might not be happy with it, but I honestly reckon I probably haven't worked a day in my life.
Yeah.
I was told pretty early that if you monetize your hobbies, then you never work. So I just set out.
Who told you that?
My koro said that, which is a hard case, because he's quite, he was quite like into formal education and kind of real structured.
Yeah.
And he almost kind of like influenced or forced me to do the opposite. Like it was almost like I was his, he wanted to see what, it was almost like he wanted to see what would happen if someone went against the grain. Because he encouraged most of our whānau and stuff to run that formal education line. Like, and, there was kind of like a running joke in the whānau that if you ever went to uni, then koro shouts, because he's so into that. And like he was a big influence with helping get started the Ministry of Education and stuff like that. He was a big part of MOE and did a lot of mahi there. That's, I guess, so when I was at school, my first probably job, I think would have been, I could actually probably say it was DJing. So what happened was, when I was at school, there was a DJ playing a school social, and I was just standing by there watching it. I'd seen like a lot of DJs on TV and stuff, and the way I used to be obsessed with the way they would juggle and scratch, and I was just watching him. And then during that night, that gig, he got a phone call saying that his son had gone into the hospital, and that he'd been in an accident. He just pulls me over and goes, "Bro, this is how you do this. This is how you do this. Go hard." And he just left. And so that was like me, 14-year-old, left at our school social, like, and in my head, I guess I kind of had the like good attitude with it, and that it didn't scare me. I was just like, well, I'm not getting paid. There's no pressure on me. If I muck this up, it's all going to be his fault.
Did you muck it up?
Nah. Oh, well, I don't know. Probably.
Did it go off?
Yeah. No, but it did. Like like the kids and stuff for like a few weeks after that were like, man, you were really good, and that kind of pumped me up to. I ended up falling into that as, I guess, a career, or being self-employed as a DJ for the last 16 years, and it all started because of that.
Yeah.
So that was probably my first job. I was one of those typical kids at school that talked too much and distracted the other kids from doing their work. Thankfully, I got my work done, but then not helping others get their work done became a bit of a problem. I had an awesome careers lady. Shout out to Christelle Chapman. She was amazing. Shows the difference it can make when teachers actually care.
Yeah.
She said, this kid obviously loves music and he loves people. Music plus people equals radio.
Yeah.
So she got me an internship at our Te Korimako Taranaki. Got me an internship there when I was 15. And same thing. come to the end of that, they said, what are your plans? I was like, well, I suppose I'll head off to uni and do communications or journalism or something because I really enjoyed this. They're like, nah, stay here, we'll train and pay you. So I got my diplomas and stuff through them. They paid for it all. And I spent 8 years there doing that. And then after that, I shot off to Aussie and started a business over there, doing some money. It's actually this kind of sounds.
Are you going to say money laundering?
No, sounds like the start of a bad joke. There was me, an English fella, and an Aussie fella in a bar. Had a conversation about kind of disposable income that they've got in Australia and how it was pretty ridiculous. Like they were spending
that mining cash.
Yeah, pretty much. And I was like, there's got to be some good causes that this could go towards. So we started doing marketing for non-profits and getting people to spend that disposable income with charity to make a difference, because everyone's looking for a tax write-off, so there were ways to levy that. So did that for about 5 years, and then moved home, moved into the retail space working for Spark, which, to be honest, I was like, I'm just going to go and do that and bide my time until I find something else I want to do. But I actually really enjoyed it. They really looked after me. I know that Spark is seen as being like a big bad corporation for a lot of people, but I couldn't talk positively about them enough. They were amazing, like especially like as Māori, like something I really love in places as a Māori is when they take the time to understand the cultural nuances of tangihanga. Like when there's those times when you've got to go for like 10 days sometimes, or 5 days, there was never an issue. I definitely had to explain myself. It wasn't just like, yeah, cool, go. Be like, sit down, work out a bit of a plan, get in touch. They might give me some email work to do while I was gone, just things I could manage while I was away. They were always willing to work together with that. So shout outs to Spark for that. And then I stopped work because I wanted to build the podcast. So I stopped work, because I was like, I'll do it in the pockets of my day, I was just never getting it done. So I was like, I'm going to stop work.
You have to be really intentional way with podcasting. Or with content in general.
Hard out. So I quit work and then got to mahi on the podcast for a little while, and it was just like sorting out guests and building up the content and doing that sort of stuff. And then after that got a bit of momentum, then I started looking for work again. Saw an ad pop up for these fellas for Shopify on the old Facebook. Bit of a running joke at Shopify as well. They still don't have my CV because I didn't believe it was kind of real, because, within Aotearoa, it's still not culturally normal for people to do remote work. Obviously post-COVID, it's like everyone's doing it, but pre-COVID and also responding to an ad on Facebook probably wasn't, your typical job recruitment route here in Aotearoa. So, this ad said something
even
like,
getting jobs in e-commerce in Aotearoa still, it's building, but there's not a lot.
There's a lot of people coming in now. So, but so the ad was something like, it was stupid too, like an ad that wouldn't really appeal to me. It said something like, earn $55,000 from home. Like, it sounded pyramid scheme as. And then for some reason I applied and got talking to them. They wanted my CV.
Because you're money launderer, that's why.
And they wanted to see my like my CV and stuff, and I was just like, nah, I don't trust you. Like, okay, then we're gonna have a talk on the phone. We had a chat on the phone, did what they call a gauntlet, and then had like an interview, and then we were on.
Awesome.
And then slowly, I guess, moving into the role that I'm in now. So I'm what's called an Indigenous business developer for Shopify. And so that kind of happened because of the mahi I was, I guess, already doing within the business. So, when it was Te Wiki o Te Reo.
How long have you been there all up?
I'll be there, it'll be 2 years on the 12th of September. So coming up to my 2-year birthday. Which in Shopify years is really long. Because the progression is so quick. They kind of, they're great at finding out what you're passionate about and moving you into that area if you want to move. I was one of those hoha fellas that was like, nah, I'm sweet, I don't want to move. And, had opportunities pop up, and I was kind of batting them away left, right and centre. I was like, no, I love what I'm doing. And then when I saw an opportunity to advocate for our people from within, once again, another corporate beast, I guess. I leapt at the opportunity, and probably more so because it's, what's the word? It was like almost betrothed to me, It was people within the organisation that said, and Māori people, or Indigenous people globally, actually, they said, we want you to come on our team because we can see what you bring. It's very different to you applying for a role, right? So totally. Having, you've met the sis and Nez, and having people like that say, we want you to be a part of our team, that was huge for me. And then once I learned about the awesome mahi that we're actually doing, some of it I can maybe share, some of it I definitely can't. But some of the mahi that they're doing, man, it's awesome. And to know that there's a big once again, corporate giant out
why
there
don't you share a little bit? Because I think even the fact that Shopify has its roots in Canada, which I think influences the reason they're so into Indigenous people. Like whenever people think, oh, they have an Indigenous team, that it's just a box tick. But maybe just do share a little bit about what you can share about what that team does or what,
so that's
you're
important,
about to do. Important
to recognise too, there's things that I can share and things that I can't. I don't mean...
And we won't spend too long on this, but...
And I don't mean like there's secret projects we're working on. I mean that I am not Indigenous First Nations, so I can't speak on their behalf. Because a lot of that mahi did start from our whanaunga over there, who are deep in that space and been doing the mahi a lot longer than we've even had an Aotearoa team. So it's important to acknowledge the Kazis over there putting their work in. But essentially, people within Shopify started advocating more for Indigenous rights and Indigenous perspectives from within Shopify. And once again, shout outs to them. We all know for anyone that's ever worked in spaces where Indigenous voices aren't the loudest, it does take a lot of resilience and a lot of, going back and forth again after getting pushed away. And so, shout outs to those guys for continuing the mahi and never giving up on it. And then eventually it led to a point where Shopify acknowledged the detrimental aspects of colonization. Like they said, we know that colonization has taken away the ability of Indigenous people to have economic sovereignty. And we want to be part of righting that wrong. Of course, there's like some natural mistrust when you've got that. I mean, I don't want to call it trauma, perhaps, but there's that natural
fatigue.
thing. Yeah, and that natural thing of like this person. So if I look at, say, governments or whatever has been a physical person, when this person's given you so many examples and reasons not to trust them, it's hard when they do want to actually help. And I think that speaks for society as a whole. When someone you're used to kind of using and abusing you, when they do genuinely want to start helping, it is hard to believe that. So Shopify now, they've been committed to, as I said, restoring that economic sovereignty to Indigenous peoples globally. And like, we're not perfect. There's still things that we're working out and still things that we're trying to do. But we've started, and that's huge. One project that's I've been absolutely loving, that I've been introduced to some of our whanaunga in the Northern Territories of Australia. There's a little community up there, and they want to have, I'll use that term again, economic sovereignty, because they want to stay within their rohe. The smart thing to do, the easy thing to do, and I guess the capitalist thing to do, or the commercially viable thing to do, would be to move away from their rohe and send their kids to schools in the cities and stuff like that, because it's a lot easier. Because this place is way out on the wops. Like, they've got a 50-year-old cell phone tower there. They've got old copper lines through the ground that I think their local agency have said they're not going to maintain those lines anymore, because they're just out in the middle of nowhere. And so they've been freaking out because they're they don't want to send their kids to the city, which they'll have to do because the school will close, because it's not going to get any data. It's not going to get learning facilities for their kids. Their like innovation hubs like this will be closed and things like that, so they're going to have to move, which they don't want to do. So one of the projects that we're working on is actually getting them a satellite link directly to their rohe, so they don't have to move and they don't have to rely on that tower. So that's a big project that we're working on at the moment, which fingers crossed will be through. And so that's part of the team. That's part of the mahi that I get to help out with now. And even, with you fellas and the great projects that you've got coming up, it's cool to be here to support and tautoko, whether that's running a workshop, whether that's just good old pūtea, which I know, there's been conversations around that as well. And even like talking to some of the people that I've met here in the short time I've been here this morning, like every conversation, there's little ideas that I know that we can slot into and help out with. So I've been making notes and stuff, talking to all sorts of different people. And I honestly feel like a brown Santa, feel like Hanakoko, because it's kind of part of my role to come in and and offer support on Pūti and the places that we can on behalf of Shopify in order to tip the scales, to level out the playing field and restore that economic sovereignty to not only to Māori but Tangata Pacifica, our Indigenous whānau, the First Nations, our whānau over there in Aussie.
Yeah.
So big job, small team,
Awesome.
big job, but meaningful stuff that excites me. And
do you want people to hit you up if that interests them?
yeah, I mean, let's have a conversation at least. I don't have an email to give out at the moment because we're getting that established because we know we're going to need one.
Yeah.
So that is definitely going to be coming, but maybe just have them reach out to you guys and you can forward them on to me for now until we put together something more formally.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. For sure,
Cool.
I'm not shy to have a conversation. We might not be able to meet face to face or Zoom all the time, but a quick email or something. But I mean, I'm all over the place now, so there's an opportunity for a 15-minute coffee. We'll try and make it happen for sure.
Yeah, choice. All right, so you're in the world of e-commerce. You're in the world of creating digital content.
Yep.
Like, what do you reckon is the opportunity for our people when it comes to e-commerce and being online in general?
Yep. So for me, I think, like hands down, and I say this all the time, and I know some of my Tauiwi friends don't like me saying it, but I say it all the time. Like, Indigenous people are the best storytellers in the world.
Yep.
Hands down. And, if you want to come talk to me about it, we can talk about it. But,
and I'll story tell you out of it.
So and in terms of that, so when I relate that to e-commerce, I love, the Kāri Māori thing that you did. Because it depends how you look at that, right? You can say, oh, cool, that's just Māori playing cards, whatever. But I know there's going to be someone out there listening who's probably had a good old game of euchre with Nanny. And now imagining to do that now with your te reo cards. And so creating stories around what it actually means and not just having the product there, like those things are huge.
Yeah.
For example, like something that I've been working on, because at the moment I'm doing my master's.
Oh, and what?
In Indigenous studies.
Oh, cool.
So how I've been relating that to my mahi in terms of the e-commerce world, because, if you can make your studies and your mahi come together, then that's less work. Energy efficient whānau, or lazy. But yeah, so the one thing that I've been working on is I don't even know if this is a word, but like tangifying stories into merchandise. So for example, there's an awesome story from down Whanganui River, and I won't get into the details because I can't remember the names, and I know these things are important, but long story short, there's a story of a taniwha that used to run up and down the Whanganui River who used to, was kind of like terrorising some of the iwi down there, and then they had to get a rangatira from up Kaiiwi ways to come down and slay said taniwha. But then it turns out that the taniwha was actually doing that because they were seeking vengeance because someone in that iwi had actually killed their friend.
Oh.
So, there's this big story.
Yeah.
And then what it actually did is we've illustrated or put that story using artwork onto a water bottle, because the water bottle obviously signifying the awa. And then what that's doing is we sell that bottle to people from that rohe that don't live in their rohe anymore. So they feel connected to home.
Yeah.
And they're able to tell a story from home and be real proud of where they're from, while sending money back home, which a lot of us like, especially for our whānau in Aussie. I know when I was living in Australia, tangi and stuff that would happen, or like marae upgrades and stuff, and you want to contribute, it's not always easy to do. Whereas now using platforms such as Shopify, we can easily organise that, but then you've also got something to hold on to and it's yours at home. When you go to your co-working space and you put a bottle down, someone goes, oh, well, what's that cool design?
Is it that bottle that you've got here?
No, it's not this one, no. But you put it down and people, what's that design? You go, well, let me tell you something cool about where I'm from. And then you can get into the kōrero. So I think there's a lot of space there to be, and I'm happy to talk about it openly because I'm hoping someone rips the idea off. Go for it, whānau. But that's something that I've been having to do with my masters as well.
And I love that. I love that. It's just like a perfect segue into what I feel is like our key kōrero for today, which is around Polynesian IP or Māori Pacific Indigenous IP and how sexy it's becoming. And there's kind of two parts to that I kind of want to unpack. One is like, what is IP, I guess, and what do we mean by Polynesian IP or Indigenous IP? And then the second part is I guess just seeing, and this is from my own experience and my own observations, is how sexy and attractive it is right now, and it's forcing what I'm calling the colonial land grab of our time, where people with money, whether they're VCs or companies like Disney or whatever like that, that are really keen on grabbing a piece of this IP and monetizing it. I don't know where to start, but what would you say around what actually is IP and what is Polynesian or Indigenous IP?
Yeah, so really simply for me, and there'll be someone out there that can probably describe it better than me. Like I just like dumbify all the words that they wrote. Like, so lawyers and like lawmakers and stuff, they love to make things seem overcomplicated, intimidating, so that your regular Joes such as myself don't go bother looking there because it just sounds too hard. But we think
too many words.
Yeah, there are too many syllables usually. So intellectual property is like property is like a space that you own, right? Or some, I guess, a space that can be owned. Intellectual, things that happen in your head. So that's like the ownership of ideas.
Yeah,
that's essentially what intellectual property is. Who owns an idea?
Yeah.
And you're right. Like it is. Like I had never thought of until you emailed me the other day. I'd never thought of it as being the land grab, but that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's so hard because it's one of those things where, like when we look at the ownership of land, right, and our people, like we didn't own land. We were custodians. We were kaitiaki. We worked with the land. It was collectively owned or collectively looked after.
Yeah.
So that's why not one person owned it. The iwi owned it. The whānau owned it. And that's exactly what happens with our IP. Or that's still what happens. Like if I use Maui in the Sun.
Yeah.
Like no one owns that kōrero.
Yeah.
But we all look after it.
Yeah.
We all do
Same with the Taniwha Whanganui River.
Yeah, yeah. So no, like, you know, like, so even in that aspect though, I mean, the reason why I don't kind of bring up the specific iwis and stuff is that I'd argue that they own it because that's their kōrero.
Yeah.
And then you're going to get like, so then say like a Disney come in and they say, okay, we're going to take this, we're going to use this. And you're like, well, you can't. They're like, why? No one owns it.
Yeah.
So then our whānau are having to collectivise to own it just to stop someone else from owning it.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what happened with our land.
And I think the worst part though is seeing them sell it off. When people get stuck in maybe not understanding what's going on. Like for us with Kāri Māori, when you really look at it, the value is not the deck of cards. The value is the concept. It's almost the brand and what we do, the idea behind Kāri Māori. Anyone can design up a deck of cards. There's nothing new there. There's nothing worth, saying I own this. What is ours and what we've even, as far as copyright and stuff, the IP and the ability for that to grow and to even monetize is in the brand itself and Kāri Māori. And I think across the board, and this is what I was saying before, how I've seen it, is that whether it's naming things with te reo Māori, taking whakatauki or pūrākau and using that as a brand or as a way to enhance people's brands, all of that sort of stuff, it's really interesting for me to see how people that are non-Māori or non-Indigenous think that they can just have that and use that however they want. But then from a commercial side, when you're trying to build something, like even if we go back to Disney, you think about Disney, their money is not necessarily in the movie that they put out.
No.
Like Frozen, the money's in the brand itself. The money's in the idea around Frozen. It's in the merchandising. It's in all the things that happen once the movie's been released. And I think I just want our people to realise that our creativity, our stories, what has been handed down to us, we have to protect that because people are after it, left, right, and centre, because it sells.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you're exactly right. Like Disney's worth is in their storytelling ability. It's not in the actual production.
Yeah.
It's the ability to, because the production's nothing without a good story.
Yeah, exactly.
And and even when I mentioned my studies and stuff before, I did like a little bit of a presentation down at Altai. The University of Canterbury, and I spoke about that, and I mentioned in particular Pocahontas.
Yeah.
Like that story was taken,
wildly
appropriated.
Yeah.
Like when you look into the real story of Pocahontas, man, it's shocking, it's sad. It was actually really upsetting. I felt bad because I gave my kōrero and heaps of people in that room didn't know. Yeah. And they went and looked it up afterwards, and I had people coming up to me like in tears, and they were like, man, I had no idea. They make it sound like the those soldiers are the good guys coming in and rescuing Pocahontas. It's not like they'd stole it. So you're right, you know, that when they take those stories, they also control the narrative, and narrative is everything with stories. When you change a narrative, you change the entire story. How we protect that, that's going to take a smarter fella than me. I mean,
me too.
I know that it needs to be protected, of course. How you go about that, I don't know, because it's that once again, if we use the analogy of land again, our people, you know, you couldn't under, let's call it Pākehā law. I don't know what else to call it. It had to be owned by one person, right? In order for us. So our whānau would get together and be like, okay, let's delegate someone, you know, in an ideal world. Obviously, a lot of times that didn't happen. Kind of the surveys or whatever be like, oh, you're part of this family? They're like, yeah, cool, you own it, sell it to me. Like, you know, the shady deals like that, we're done. And that sort of stuff's going to happen again. Like, it's just that it's happening.
And it's happening again.
Happening with ideas now.
And the couple of things that I see is there's just like the straight cultural appropriation, which is not new. It's stuff that's been happening for ages, and Māori are getting more onto it with, you know, hitting people up and making sure that stuff stops happening. For me, in the New Zealand like venture capital scene, where there's still like a wide open book as far as investing in Māori companies, and the number of people that are willing to invest in Māori companies, it's still mostly Pākehā. And the ones that are savvy to it now are out there like hunting as much as they can to buy up shares and ownership in these Māori-owned Māori developed companies. Because it's going to make them money, right? Yeah, exactly. And then what comes with that, and that's why I call it a colonial land grab, because what comes with that is that I own this and I'm making decisions, and I'm going to tell you how to do it from here on out. And it's stuff like that really gets me concerned, and the fact that within Te Ao Māori there's still, I mean, the idea of venture capitalism and the idea of Te Ao Māori not necessarily even fit in the same corridor, but if we just say it's separate and not actually lean into it, then that will happen separate of a Te Ao Māori view pushing back on them. I mean, I think some of the bigger iwi organisations, you know, they look at business investment and stuff like that, and they're further down the track. But I would love to see more of that happen at a more grassroots level, and our people who are starting businesses and generating IP that has the potential to make an economic, you know, base for their whānau in the future, that stays within Te Ao Māori, the ownership and then the potential commercial return. I think that's some stuff where I'm like, man, we've got to get going on this. For sure. And I mean, there's still like spaces to, like, it's the gift and the curse, right, of the time, and that when those things have never been done before, it's awesome because there's no template and no pressure of systems to follow. But then also there's like opportunities for people to take advantage of the fact that there's no precedent. Exactly. So like when you look at venture capitalism, I definitely think it can work in the fact that I mean, typically with a venture, my understanding of venture capitalist deals is that they want ownership share, right, or majority share. And they want to make a profit. In order for supporting your kaupapa. I think, like, there's got to be venture capitalists out there that are, you know, got some sort of, either they're Indigenous led or they've got an Indigenous influence in there, which I know will be rare. And we know that they're predominantly run and owned by, you know, tauiwi. But there's got to be someone that can kind of try and communicate the idea that you can still help out by investing a lot of money to get the kaupapa off the ground without requesting a majority share, because that majority share is what gives you the control, right? Are you there to control and have ownership, or are you there to support the kaupapa? And I think that's where the difference can be. Just because venture capitalism isn't typically done with that in mind doesn't mean it cannot be remixed to now do that with that in mind. And so when you're like giving, say, $1 million, but you're only asking for 20% share, you're still going to make profit on that 20%, but you just don't have the ability to control someone's idea. That would show me that you genuinely want to help the kaupapa and be there for the cause, as opposed to own it. Now, I know that doesn't make smart economically or commercially. That's not smart, but we're not talking about being smart commercially. We're talking about getting the kaupapa off the ground. I think that's where the two can marry. There's always got to be some sacrifice, right? And yeah, I mean, obviously they want to make as much as they can, but it depends what the priority is for you. And if your values don't align to that goal, then I probably don't want you as my investor anyway. That's just me thinking aloud. And I think therein lies the challenge, right? Because it fundamentally what venture capitalists are trying to achieve is is capitalism.
Yep.
And there's that fundamental shift. I would love to see some more Māori-led VC kōrero, VC opportunities, investment funds, things like that keep the IP within Te Ao Māori.
I think the great thing that's happening, well, there's a big cultural shift happening within Aotearoa where a lot of our allies, I don't really like that term either, but a lot of our tauiwi friends who are happy to help out with tangata whenua because they acknowledge all the craziness of colonisation, everything that's happened. I think there'll be a lot of people who will be willing to participate with perhaps that idea that I mentioned or variations of that idea, because they understand the struggle and they've bought into the movement. Because it cracks me up seeing things in the news with they're trying to say that Māori doesn't add any value, or there's those certain people that are saying that we should be learning
they're just dumb.
A different deal. We should be learning Chinese because that's better on an economic platform. But like a lot of those people I thought were smart businessmen until they say things like that. I'm like, how do you not understand that te reo or Māori or, no matter where you are, the indigenous culture of your land is your only unique selling point or the most unique selling point to your product or business. So why would you not want to work in partnership or collaboration with that idea or that kaupapa as opposed to like trying to shut it down and stop it? It just seems silly. Like I just shake my head there. What type of
and I think like
it's
it's up to us as well to front foot that, to prepare for that, to like actually come in knowing what that looks like for us. If we want to engage with people that will help us grow our business, what does that actually look like and what does it mean and what are you willing to give and what are you not? Or what are some systems and processes that we could use? Like when it comes, if you say reflect back on Bestsiiide on your podcast, like how do you, if there was to be an opportunity where someone was to come in and own some of that, what would you be willing to give and what would you not? Yeah,
you got to have those values, right?
Yeah.
And like I'll be honest now, I get sponsorship offers all the time. People want to sponsor episodes or they want to do stuff, and the only reason why I don't have one yet is because I just don't see any. I haven't had anyone yet that aligns.
Yeah.
Someone will come along and they'll align and we'll do some damage and it'll be amazing.
How do you know if they align?
Just because I guess I know what I want and I kind of know what the mission is. So far, like they've all just been quoted all around.
That's a really important point, I reckon.
It's like for me, like the core like tagline of it is just having the conversations worth having.
Yeah.
And so they'll come in and we'll have these kōrero like, okay, well, what are your expectations of me and the brand, I guess? And they're like, well, we just want to make sure that you talk. So like for example, I had a men's product. I'll try not to name them, but I had a men's product come in and they wanted to
Durex.
they wanted to sponsor a few episodes, and I said, well, cool. How would you feel though if I had like a competitor of yours come on and they talked in, because I don't muffle anyone. Yeah. So how my podcast typically works is that we'll record it.
Yeah.
I give it to them for a couple of days to mull on it. If they're like, hey, I want to change this, that, and the other thing, it doesn't go to air. So I've got a lot of dead interviews that haven't made it because people have wanted to change too much.
Yeah.
Whereas the other ones are like, give it and they're like, no, that's cool, bro. Hi there. The ones that I love are the ones that are like, publish it, bro, but it's going to make me a bit nervous. I was like, well, that shows that it needs to happen.
Yeah.
So then when we looked at, so coming back to the sponsor, when I said to them, well, if I get this person in and they talk about, all the things they've gone through, and then they just happen to mention their product, how are you going to feel like that being a direct competitor? And they're like, oh, no, we can't have that. I was like, well, then we shouldn't work together. Like it's simple as that. I'm pretty ruthless though.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, what's your mission?
But you got to be
how does that
up,
align?
right?
Nah, that doesn't seem to work. Yeah, and I think that's probably like, I think a big thing as well with tangata whenua is that like we need to be reminded of our own worth. We've had like 200 years of being told that we're not worth much. And I think as we recognize that we are, we mentioned before, I think we use the commercial term of like the unique value proposition that we bring to the market, meaning our uniqueness as tangata whenua is kick-ass and no one else has it.
Yeah.
That's the translation of that. And once we come to click more and understand our own awesomeness, then I think we get more comfortable negotiating in those spaces. Like one big kōrero I've been having with friends at the moment, just quickly because I know you want to move on, but
we're good.
is the whakatauki, e hara te kumara, e kōrero mo tōna ake reka.
Ai.
So, like, literally, for those that don't know, that means the kumara doesn't talk about how sweet it is. And I've been, like, having conversations with friends lately. Is that something, like, traditional or something that we've always said? I don't know the origins of that whakatauki, so feel free to DM me, email me, whatever, to fill in the gaps. But I wonder if that was, like, if that's even ours, or if that's, like, something that, like, was put on us to kind of keep us in our place.
I don't know either.
So like those are just kind of something that I've been talking
part
with
of what I
mates
take
about.
from that whakatauki too is like kind of like your it's not up to you to show, as in to talk about what it's like the whole idea of your reputation precedes you.
Yeah.
So it's other people's, what other people think of you. That is your status, not what you think of yourself and can say of yourself. I think that's another way that I look at that too.
For sure. And once again, I think I love that perspective, because then once again that shows you, right, like if people are telling you you're awesome, then you should believe that you're awesome.
Or your kai and your wharekai, your marae, everyone will know it's good if it's good. Not because you're standing there going, I make
it's
nice
good.
kai.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, cool. So yeah, like I think that's a big thing. Like, man, I don't know what to say other than like I can't wait until we start believing in ourselves a bit more. It's definitely happening. When I look at the Kazi Rawiri and Deb's the mahi that they're doing with Te Pāti Māori, they're definitely instilling a bit more of that belief. I love how like that that waiata has become synonymous with Te Pāti Māori. They believe in the magic and things like that. And there's all sorts of little nuances that I'm seeing happen. Obviously the sad thing is that we're getting some big pushback for people that are freaking out. Like a kid having a tantrum when they know they're not going to get what they want, they start throwing everything everywhere and going hard. But
at least it's out in the open, right?
Yeah, hard. Yeah. And then there'll be some shadow games
just revealing
happening
themselves.
And that's the thing too. Like there were once upon a time where they could have done that, and that would have been perceived as normal and okay. Yeah. Whereas now, like people are calling out their racist uncle at dinner.
Have you watched Polynesian Panthers?
No, not yet.
The first episode. I just watched a couple last night, and it opens up like this is blatant racist commentary towards Pacifica from the 70s and 60s. Yeah, it's pretty buzzy. Like blatant media, just interviews. Saying,
have you checked out that?
Got to get rid of them. We've got to send them home. Like,
and that's what used to happen, right? And
it was just normal.
And you still catch like that odd person. Like, I mean, not me because it's not in my whare, but I mentioned my big extended whānau before, and a lot of them were Pākehā. And I'll get friends that come to me like, bro, I went home for Christmas and my uncle's like one of those people you see on TV. And I'm like, well, what did you do about it? They're like,
Redneck Randy.
Yeah, they're like, I called him out on it. Awkward for convo. And they're like, and even once upon a time, like they would have called them out and their whole family at the table would have turned on them. But now they're like, you know what? He's right, Granddad. Like you need to cut them. And the Granddad's like, I've just always been like this. So
I like what you're getting at before too about us believing in ourselves. Like, and it kind of like it made me think about some of the stories of the early days of colonial settlers and us Māori selling ourselves off for a blanket and a musket and some rum and stuff like that. And I feel like I just don't want to see that happen again now, where someone will dangle a carrot that is a bit of money, more money than maybe we thought we could get, and then you just straight away grab it because it's there instead of going through the process of is this right long term, but then also having the tools they need to be able to process that as well. Those things like, are our values aligned? Have the conversation up front and like settle what does this mean and what do I have to give and what will I get back and things like that. Having access to contracts or terms and conditions that people can use to put stuff in place. Like I think there are some really practical things we can help people have as well, and to be able to know what the value of your IP is in the future, not just now, and not sell it off for a bloody blanket and a musket.
Because that's what it is. Like when you think that you use the analogy of the carrot dangle. Yeah.
You think, 10K you mean?
Yeah, well you think 10K is worth like my idea. You don't understand, like, your idea could be $1 million idea. Because it's not for some reason. It's obvious the reasons. Like, we just don't think like that sometimes.
No, and we're not driven by the money either. So,
hard out. Yeah. And even, like, so when we talk about the blankets and the rum thing, straight away I just think of Billy T, because I used to watch a lot of that when I was a kid. But, like, I even don't reckon that for me, there's no way that our tupuna thought that was ownership. They were, I truly believe that they were like, these fellas just want somewhere to put, you know, their cabin or to set up their tent, and they're giving me this blanket as like a short-term lease thing. For me, I don't believe that they were like, we're going to give you this land for this blanket. It was like, you can stay here, shop for the blankets.
Establish the deal first before you take it,
hard out. But I mean, they had language barriers and all that sort of practical stuff.
We still do.
And even just probably the belief that, no, of course they're not going to steal it from me. That's, people don't do that.
They are, mate.
And then, and then it happened.
And it still happens today.
Yeah.
Mean kōrero e hoa.
Well, we're talking about TV shows quickly. You mentioned the Panthers. Have you checked out that Reservation Dogs?
No.
The Taika Waititi one?
I haven't. It's actually, I've wanted to.
Yeah, definitely check that one out when you get a chance. Apparently, a lot of people have been struggling to get it in Aotearoa, but it's mean. Like, it's so funny watching, and I've had same conversations with our whānau over there talking about...
Where did you watch it?
Someone... I think I might have
Pirated.
been... Nah. I tried. We've got to watch out with those things on our work computers.
No.
But one of the cool things that's been finding out, like a lot of these stories, they are like synonymous to Indigenous cultures the world over. So like when you watch Reservation Dogs, like it's centered around some First Nations crew from... Apologies, I can't remember if it's America or Canada. But like it's just so relative to like running around the pa. Like it's very similar. And then I get the same kōrero from that whānau when they say they watch Boy. They get the same buzz. They're like, man, I could so relate to that. You know, the one auntie that just has every job. You know, the uncle that's into horticulture. You know, all that sort of stuff. So definitely check those out. Those stories like that are what like help us all to. It takes us from being minorities to being a majority when we all actually realise we're not too different, we're not too far separated. The more whanaunga you have, the more belonging you feel.
Yeah, have you been over to Canada?
I have
North
been.
America?
No, I've been, but I haven't hung out with our whānau over there.
Yeah.
I went over there when I was like, I think I was 21, so that was like when I was only worried about what we were up to for the weekend.
Yeah.
It was kind of that phase of my life.
That's the one, eh?
I'd like to go back again there with a bit more intent.
Yeah, choice.
But at the time, like I'll be straight up. That was like I was just there to party, and I was there seeing a girl. So like I was just there for those things.
That was your focus, eh?
But I'd love, that was still in my rangatahitanga.
Yeah,
but I'd love to go back.
Give it a shout out. Got a few cool connections of whānau over there from the Cree Nation in the north of Saskatchewan. So shout out to that whānau, the Marasti whānau over there.
Oh, there's some mean
really
people
awesome
doing some
people.
things.
Yeah, I managed to go to the World Indigenous Business Forum when they had it over there a few years ago, and made some really cool connections. Got to do some awesome things. Jump in some of their reservations and visit some of their casinos that they had as well around there. You know, it's a lot of big way that they use their cash over there to try and make jobs, and whatever you might think of that, it is good to see it in action and see the opportunities it brings, but also the challenges, But got a lot of love for those people over there, for the First Nations. But I thought I'd give you an opportunity, since you're podcast host and all of that, to chuck a question back at me before we wrap up.
Okay.
Which one's it going to be?
Yeah.
Do you want me to do a wāta while you think about it?
Go on then.
Nah. Jokes.
What would... Do you think you're being a good ancestor? Yes or no, and why?
Yes. I think I'm being a good ancestor because I regularly involve my tupuna in the decisions I make and the things that I do, and I call on them for strength all the time. I'm actually wearing the paunami that my koro gave me when I was 16. I've had it for ages, and I feel like it's like a little kohanga reo one, but every now and then when I feel like I need a little bit of his strength, I'll chuck it back on and have them with me. So I think for me that's my way of staying connected and staying, like, I guess, on the pathway that I feel would make them proud.
Yep.
And as long as I do that, then I feel like what follows is going to be sweet. My koro instilled in us, my grandparents instilled in us a really strong value set around working together and looking after each other, and that everything that we do is for the benefit of all, not for one.
Yep.
And everything that I do now, the way that I run my businesses, the way that I lead my team, it all stems from that So I think I can honestly say hand on heart, I'm doing everything I can to make them proud.
Awesome. It's a question I ask myself before every decision.
Yeah,
like if I'm poised with something like those sponsorship deals or whatever.
Because you can hear them answer you, eh? You know exactly
out.
what they'd say, like,
and not only
get in there and do the dishes.
not only tupuna, but you kind of like, not to get too airy-fairy, but I also can hear like future gen.
Yeah.
Like I'll sit there and kind of, I guess for lack of a better term, let's say meditate on it. But like, am I being a good ancestor right now? And you hear like kaumatua, children, like the whole spectrum, it all plays in, and even like the hearty debates and like the table talk that can happen from it. So it's a question I like to ask people, and I could, like for me, like I could have had you muted then and not heard a word you say, but your body language and like you tear it up a little bit.
Yeah, I know. I was like, good question.
All that sort of
Straight
stuff that shows that you truly believe in what you say. And we've talked about self-belief, and we need more of that.
And I'm intentional in that. I work hard. To try and stay to those values that they instilled in me. Yeah. Ka pai. Man, that was choice for first kōrero. I mean, we just met face to face for the first time about an hour ago, or 2 hours ago now. So that was awesome, bro. Hopefully there'll be lots more kōrero to
I feel like we'll be doing this for months, years to come.
Yes, awesome. Watch this space. Hey, thank you so much, tēnei te mihi nui ki a koe hoa, for jumping on with us today. And enjoy the rest of your day, whānau. Ka kite.
Hei kona.